Hi, my name is Richard Pennycook and welcome to Export Kit. In this example, we're going to be taking a look at Smart Object Oriented Photoshop. So this is a completely different theme and design concept. So what we have here is our Blue Box WordPress theme, and we're going to look at the original log file. You'll see in the original log file we processed 277 layers, and it took 13 minutes approximately, 15 seconds also. So if we go back to our Photoshop file, what we have is our original setup, and what this has is folders which are structured for our theme. So we can take a look at a few pages. I'm not going to go through all, but this is just to give you a look at how they actually render. So this is our index page. If we look at our single, and if we look at our actual page theme. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to make these visible again. Now, the main concept that you want to do with Smart Object Oriented Photoshop is literally what it's called. You want to create smart objects. So rather than have pages and CSS styles, actually, before I do this, what I'm going to do is explain why. Photoshop, when it renders its layers, it takes a substantial amount of time when you have a large amount of folders and layers. And you'll see here in our actual layer view that we have a substantial amount of layers within folders themselves, and you'll see as we just navigate through. Now what happens is the more layers and folders you have, Photoshop will take a longer time to process these. So what we can do is we can actually trick Photoshop. Let me just actually save a copy of this first. Let's call this O2 Blue Box theme and Smart Object. So what we have to do, in essence, to trick Photoshop into thinking that we have less layers is to turn these into actual smart objects. So for instance, we have our CSS styles, and you can see that this is a large number of layers within the folder. So what we can do is just simply convert to smart object. Now, the important thing to do, basically the name of the smart object is going to be irrelevant. What you really want to do is just basically call it OBJ. This will ensure that the contents of the smart object, and if we take a look at them, you'll see here that we still have our original CSS styles, but this will now actually render separately when we actually compile our project. Now, depending on what version of Photoshop you have, if you're using CC 2015, you can actually now link your smart objects to your file system, so that way you can edit this independently of your original document. So we could do this alone, and this would dramatically speed it up simply because rather than the 50 layers that are encompassed, it believes it's only one now. But what we're going to do to speed up all, in essence, is we're going to basically do this for every individual aspect of the project. So let's go ahead and let's turn each folder into smart objects. Now this works well for screens and also pages, but you don't really need to do this for individual folders. So let's just turn this, we're skipping this anyway, so that doesn't matter. Let's turn the footer into a smart object. Let's turn index, single, page, okay, so now in essence what we've done is, rather than show Photoshop that we have 277 layers, now Photoshop thinks that we only have about 10. I do believe 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 layers. Okay, so Photoshop will now believe that we have 11 layers to process rather than the 277. So you'll note that the speed off the bat will be incredibly fast compared to normal. Now, secondary, what we could do is we could trick Photoshop again and basically turn all of these into a smart object and continue the process, but that's not really necessary. In another video I'll show you how you can do this in an in-depth way. But what we're going to do is basically export this as is so we can actually check the speed and compare it to our original log file. Now once we've logged in, what we can do is we can basically export right away. I'm not really going to customize any options, but let's go. So what the object tag will do is basically now it will take the contents of the smart object and now render them during the export. But for the process of the layers, Photoshop only believes that it has these individual layers to process. So it's a much faster export. This works well when you have a lot of pages and a lot of responsive screens that you're dealing with, as well as CSS styles. So originally this export was 13 minutes. So I'm just going to basically skip to the end and we can compare the time. Now that our export's complete, what we can do is basically just compare the time. And you'll see immediately that we still processed 277 layers, but it took us only 5 minutes and 30 seconds, basically. That's less than half the time, and we were able to maintain 0.8 LPS, whereas in our original, we were only at 0.35. Now, this is a dramatic difference, and the only thing that we did in here was basically to convert the main pages and CSS styles into smart objects. Now, I did say that you could go in depth, so basically while the export is running, you can look and see where it's slowing down and basically optimize that individual folder itself to create smart objects within. But now with Export Kit in Photoshop, we have smart object oriented Photoshop, and this will now dramatically speed up your export time. Also, for corporate environments, what this does, and this is basically with CC 2015, you can now link these individual smart objects. So in essence, you can have individual designers work on sections, save these sections, and they now relate to the original document. So this makes it simple to now basically maintain a structured design and export only with Export Kit.